The decision has not been made. Let that land for a moment. The Cleveland Browns, a franchise that came into this offseason with more momentum, more excitement, more genuine belief swirling around them than they have experienced in years, have not made the most important decision they need to make, the quarterback one decision. The decision that every other decision this organization makes is waiting on. The decision that the fan base is waiting on, that the media is divided over, that careers, real, professional, everything on the line careers are hanging in the balance of. The Browns have the information. They have watched the practices. They have seen the preseason. They have sat in the film rooms and had the conversations and done the evaluation work that organizations do when they are trying to make the right call on the biggest question in front of them. And still, the decision has not come. Why? What is really happening inside that building? What does the delay tell us about the quarterback battle that is consuming Cleveland right now? And whose career is genuinely on the line when this decision finally gets made? This is the full story, and it is more complicated than anyone is telling you. Decisions get delayed in the NFL for reasons, not always the reasons that are publicly stated, not always the reasons that the most obvious narrative suggests. Decisions get delayed because the situation is genuinely complicated, because the people responsible for making them are dealing with competing pressures, internal and external, short-term and long-term, football-based and non-football-based, that do not resolve themselves cleanly into a single obvious answer. Decisions get delayed because the people making them are serious about getting them right, rather than simply getting them made. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, decisions get delayed because the organization making them is caught between what the evidence is showing and what the plan was, and resolving that tension takes more time than anyone originally anticipated. The Cleveland Browns quarterback one decision delay is a story that contains all of these elements simultaneously. And to tell it properly, to give it the depth and the honesty it deserves, you have to be willing to look at it from every angle. Not just the angle that makes the Browns look decisive and visionary, not just the angle that makes them look indecisive and confused. All of it. The full, complicated, genuinely interesting picture of what is happening in one of the NFL's most scrutinized buildings right now. The starting point is the quarterback battle itself. The Cleveland Browns entered the 2026 offseason with a quarterback room that contained more genuine competition than most observers had anticipated. Shedeur Sanders, the player whose arrival in Cleveland had generated the commercial explosion and the fan excitement and the national media attention that had made the Browns one of the most talked about franchises in the league, was the centerpiece of that room. The player around whom the entire offensive construction of this team had been organized. The quarterback whose jersey was selling at historic rates, whose public profile was enormous, whose performance in practice had produced the kind of internal conviction that general managers defend publicly and fan bases celebrate on social media. But quarterback rooms in the NFL are not one-player ecosystems. They contain multiple players, each with their own careers, their own competitive drives, their own legitimate claims to consideration. And the Browns room, as the offseason progressed and the evaluation work deepened, produced a competition that was more genuine and more complicated than the public narrative, which had been building toward the Sanders coronation for months, had fully accounted for. The player or players competing with Sanders for the starting role brought something real to the evaluation, not just the adequate competition that depth chart alternatives typically provide, the kind of presence that allows an organization to say it conducted a fair evaluation without the evaluation ever being genuinely in doubt, real competition. The kind that forces coaches and front office personnel to confront the gap between the story they expected to tell and the story the evidence in front of them is actually telling. The kind that produces the delayed decisions and the divided media reactions and the career-on-the-line stakes that make quarterback battles in the NFL genuinely compelling rather than merely procedurally interesting. The media division that has emerged around the Browns' quarterback battle reflects the genuine complexity of the evaluation, rather than simply the tendency of sports media to manufacture conflict where none exists. On one side of the divide are the voices who look at everything Shedeur Sanders represents: the talent, the fit, the commercial significance, the narrative power, the organizational investment, the specific ways in which his skill set complements the weapons being assembled around him, and conclude that the delay is not about the competition at all. It is about organizational caution, about the specific institutional tendency of NFL front offices to move slowly on decisions that have large consequences, to protect themselves from being wrong by taking slightly longer than necessary to announce what they already know. These voices argue that the Browns are going to name Sanders the starter, that everyone inside the building already knows it, and that the delay is a function of process rather than genuine uncertainty. On the other side of the divide are the voices who take the competition more seriously, who point to the specific evidence, the practice reports, the preseason performance data, the internal evaluation metrics that inform quarterback depth chart decisions, that suggest the gap between Sanders and his competition is narrower than the Sanders first narrative has been projecting. These voices argue that the delay is real because the decision is real, that the Browns are facing a genuine choice with genuine consequences, that the player competing with Sanders for the starting role has done enough to make the organization pause and think carefully, rather than simply confirming what seemed predetermined, and that the delay, far from being a procedural technicality, is the outward expression of a real internal debate that has not yet been resolved. Both of these readings contain truth. The situation is genuinely complicated in the way that both sides are describing. The organization does have a strong prior toward Sanders, built through the draft investment, the roster construction, the commercial considerations, the organizational identity that has been built around his presence. And the competition is genuinely real, producing evaluation results that have given the people responsible for this decision legitimate reasons to take more time before making it. The career stakes that surround this decision extend in multiple directions simultaneously. For Shedeur Sanders, the stakes are existential in the way that all starting quarterback decisions are existential for the players seeking those jobs. This is not just a roster spot. It is the confirmation or the denial of everything his journey to this point has been building toward. The draft night slide, the resilience, the performances in practice and in preseason that had produced the internal conviction and the public excitement, and the jersey sales and the general manager going to bat for him in public. All of it was building toward the moment when the depth chart would reflect what the evidence had been suggesting. A delay does not undo that evidence, but a delay creates space for doubt. And in a career that has already been shaped by other people's doubts, the presence of any additional uncertainty is not a small thing. For the quarterback competing with Sanders, the stakes are different but equally real. This is a player who arrived in Cleveland without the commercial profile, without the cultural footprint, without the draft status that surrounds Sanders, and that creates a kind of gravitational pull toward the narrative of his inevitability. This is a player who has competed on pure football merit, who has shown up every day and performed in ways that forced an organization to take the competition seriously, rather than simply going through the motions of a fair evaluation. Whatever happens when the decision is finally made, the fact that this player made it a genuine competition is a professional statement that will follow him through the rest of his career. If he wins the job, it will be one of the most remarkable stories of the offseason. If he does not win the job, his performance in this competition is the kind of evidence that other organizations notice, and that can shape career opportunities in ways that the outcome of this particular battle does not determine. The coaching staff is living in the middle of all of this, with the specific discomfort of people who have a decision to make, who understand the full weight of what that decision means, and who are determined to make it correctly rather than conveniently. Head coaches in the NFL are evaluated ultimately on wins and losses, and the quarterback decision is the single most consequential variable in the win-loss equation for any NFL team. The coaching staff's relationship with this decision is not academic. It is deeply personal and deeply professional. They have watched both quarterbacks, they have evaluated both quarterbacks, they have had the film sessions and the practice observations and the game planning conversations that inform the deepest level of professional evaluation, and they are sitting with a conclusion that they are not yet ready to announce publicly, either because the conclusion is genuinely not final, or because the process of making it official requires more organizational alignment than currently exists. Andrew Berry's role in the delay is significant and worth examining carefully. The general manager who was willing to defend Sanders publicly, who put the organizational credibility of the front office behind the young quarterback in ways that were unusual and noticed, that same general manager is now navigating the delay of a decision that his public statements had implied was approaching inevitability. This is not a comfortable position. When a general manager's public communications have set expectations about a direction, and then the visible evidence suggests the direction is taking longer to confirm than expected, the gap between the expectations and the reality becomes a story of its own. Berry is aware of this. His communications during the delay period have been careful in the specific way that careful communications during sensitive organizational moments are always careful, saying enough to maintain credibility, not saying enough to create new obligations that the eventual decision might not fulfill. The ownership group is watching all of this with the patience and the anxiety that ownership groups always bring to significant quarterback decisions. Ownership in Cleveland has invested financially, emotionally, reputationally in the direction this franchise has been heading. They believe in Berry. They believe in the coaching staff. They believe in the vision that has been built and the player who has been placed at the center of it. But ownership also understands results. They understand that the NFL is a results business and that the quarterback decision is the most results-consequential decision the organization makes in any given year. Their patience with the process is real. It is not unlimited. The AFC North context adds pressure from outside the building that is impossible to fully insulate against. The Ravens are committed to Lamar Jackson. The Bengals are committed to Joe Burrow. The Steelers are navigating their own quarterback questions with the specific urgency of a franchise that understands the cost of instability at the position. The division is not waiting for Cleveland to figure out its quarterback situation. It is preparing, it is planning, it is building rosters and installing schemes and developing competitive strategies that are based on the assumption that every opponent in the division is going to be taken seriously. Cleveland's delay does not slow down the competition. It simply means the competition is getting ready while Cleveland is still making its decision. The national media's divided reaction to the delay has produced a coverage landscape that is as much about the media's own narrative investments as it is about the actual situation in Cleveland. The reporters and analysts who had built significant content infrastructure around the Sanders coronation narrative, who had covered the jersey sales and the Andrew Berry defense and the practice performance and the cultural significance of his arrival, found the delay uncomfortable in ways that expressed themselves through coverage that tended to minimize the significance of the competition and emphasize the organizational process framing. The reporters and analysts who had maintained more skeptical positions about Sanders' readiness found the delay vindicating in ways that expressed themselves through coverage that tended to amplify the competition's legitimacy and question the organizational commitment to following the evidence wherever it led. Neither camp was fully right. Neither was fully wrong. The truth, as it always is in situations this complicated, was sitting in the space between the competing narratives, accessible only to the people inside the building who had the full picture, and partially accessible to the outside world through the combination of reported information and analytical inference that sports journalism at its best produces. What the delay is revealing about the Cleveland Browns organization is actually more interesting than what either narrative camp has been willing to acknowledge. It is revealing an organization that is serious about the decision, serious in the specific way that distinguishes front offices that have learned from past mistakes from front offices that are still repeating them. The Browns have been through enough quarterback decisions made too quickly, made with insufficient evaluation, made under the pressure of outside expectations rather than the discipline of internal conviction, to understand the cost of getting this one wrong. The delay is not indecision, it is the specific kind of deliberateness that serious organizations bring to consequential decisions, the willingness to take the time necessary to be right rather than the time convenient to appear decisive. There is also a development component to the delay that the binary nature of the depth chart conversation tends to obscure. Quarterback development is not a switch that gets flipped at a specific moment. It is a continuous process. The evaluation of a developing quarterback is not a single photograph taken at one moment in time, but a film, a moving, evolving picture of a player growing and learning and performing and struggling and growing again. The Browns are watching that film in real time. The delay in the decision is, in part, the organization giving that film enough additional frames to ensure that the picture it presents is as complete and as reliable as possible before the conclusion is committed to officially. The media division about this delay is ultimately a division about what kind of story the Cleveland Browns are telling. The people who see the delay as a procedural technicality on the way to the inevitable Sanders announcement are telling a story about organizational vision and player talent and the unstoppable momentum of a narrative that has been building since draft night. The people who see the delay as evidence of genuine organizational uncertainty are telling a story about the gap between expectations and reality, about the complexity of NFL quarterback evaluation, and about the possibility that the most exciting narrative is not always the most accurate one.
The player at the center of it all, Shedeur Sanders, is handling the delay with the composure that has defined his entire journey to this point. He is not demanding answers. He is not creating drama. He is preparing. He is studying film and taking reps and building the relationships with his teammates that matter regardless of what the depth chart says. He is doing what players of genuine character do when circumstances are outside their control, focusing entirely on the things within their control and trusting that the quality of their preparation will express itself in the quality of their performance when the opportunity comes. His patience in this moment is not passive, it is active and intentional, and the product of a young man who understands that the measure of a competitor is not how he behaves when things are going his way, but how he behaves when he is being made to wait for something he has already earned. The decision is coming. It has to come. The calendar of professional football does not accommodate indefinite organizational deliberation on the most important roster question of the year. When it comes, when the Browns officially announce who their quarterback one is and what the depth chart looks like and what the organizational vision for the season ahead is, it will be received by a media landscape that is divided, by a fan base that is anxious, and by a league that is paying close attention to what happens in Cleveland. It will be a statement about the organization as much as about the player. It will be a commitment with real consequences and real stakes attached to it. And it will either confirm the narrative that has been building around Shedeur Sanders since draft night, the narrative of a player whose talent and resilience and character were always going to carry him to this moment, or it will complicate that narrative in ways that redirect the story towards something nobody is currently expecting. Whatever it is, it will be real. In Cleveland, after everything this franchise and this fan base have been through, real is what matters most. And the story of what the Browns decide and what that decision produces on football fields in the months ahead is the most compelling chapter yet in a story that is still being written. Delays in the NFL are not neutral. They carry information. They reflect the internal reality of organizations navigating decisions that matter, decisions with real consequences for real people whose careers and futures are genuinely on the line.
The Cleveland Browns quarterback 1 delay is telling a story about an organization that is serious about getting it right, about a quarterback competition that is more real than the coronation narrative suggested, about careers hanging in the balance of a decision that the most important people in that building are still working to make with the conviction and the clarity that it deserves. The decision is coming. The media is divided, the careers are on the line, and Cleveland is watching every single moment of it. Disclaimer: this video is produced for a media channel and is based on publicly available reports, NFL off-season coverage, practice reporting, media analysis, and ongoing developments surrounding the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation as of April 2026. The content presents balanced analysis of all perspectives in the quarterback debate. Some details regarding internal organizational discussions are drawn from industry reporting and sourced accounts and have not been independently verified. This content is produced for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not represent the official positions of the Cleveland Browns, the NFL, Shedeur Sanders, or any other individual or organization mentioned.